Welcome to Massa Beers. My name is Matt. We do the beer stuff here. Old beer. Old MFing beer. We love old beer, especially when it's big beer. Big old beer. Big old barrel-aged bottle conditioned beer. There's a lot of bees in there. We're still gonna do it. I don't know why a lot of bees would make any. I don't know. Anyway, the Bruery. There's another bee. This is the Bruery White Oak. I have had this beer before. I don't believe I've ever reviewed it before. This is a 50% wheat wine style ale aged in bourbon barrels. And then it just says 50% ale. So I guess it's a blended beer. It says a hearty blended wheat wine style ale with a canopy of caramel-esque, vanilla-ish, and oak-like flavors. Contains alcohol 12.5%. That's session beer standards by Bruery. You know what I mean? Like, usually you're easily into the 15s, if not pushing 19s on their stuff. So 12.5%, we're talking about session beers for them. And this is from 2016. I paid $8 American for this beer not too long ago. A local ShopRite, yes. It's a grocery store called ShopRite. It's actually a really good grocery store. And they have beer in the state of New Jersey. Sometimes they have it actually. No, none of them have them in the grocery store. They're like separate beer shops, typically located around a grocery store. And this particular one is, they always have like old beer. It's like weird. And like I go there and I'm like, okay. You know, obviously there was somebody in the past who, let's kind of try to get this camera to refocus here. Why is my camera doing that? There we go. Somebody obviously worked there and was like in the beer back in the day. And they got a bunch of this Bruery stuff, and I guess that's my game. We'll get to the rest of the story here. We'll read in the back real quick. It says, White Oak is a hearty blended wheat wine style ale, grafting elements reminiscent of caramel, vanilla, coconut, and warm oak with a creamy complexity of wheat, crisp, effervescent spirals around sweet bourbon barrel-aged layers, expanding into a refreshingly robust ale. But I went there probably about 3-4 weeks ago, and they had like a table out, like just like a, you know, fold-out table, and it just said, I guess it's like old beer, or it didn't say old beer, it said something like big bottle beer blowout or something like that, and basically it was all their old beer was on like hyper discount. And it wasn't like priced like, okay, this one's this much, this one this much. It was like all the bottles that are big are $8. All the bottles that are smaller, like whatever, like $6 or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll take a flyer. That's where we landed here. So classic Bruery stylings, old school labeling, the whole nine. Not gonna say I loved it back in the day, but I'm getting a little bit more kind of like nostalgic on their old school labels. And as far as that goes, listen, you could talk about having beers look a bunch of different ways, but you know, you can go triple IPA in that, you can go Saison. That's what wheat wine looks like. That is exactly what wheat wine looks like. So we're very, very much off to a very apropos start there. Big legs on that sucker. Nice kind of like apricot glow to the beer. If I lean it over to my light here, you can see what I'm talking about. And this super tight compact bubble head. The nose. Let's see if it knows. Yeah, I mean, it is. You get that slight kind of banana phenolic that you typically get on wheat beers. But since you're dealing with wheat wine, it's something a bit more bigger. You combine the age here you're talking about, you know, 4, 5, 6 years, 7 years, man, I'm getting old. 7 years of age, coming off sickness, so I get a little bit of post-nasal drip, I apologize. So you're getting a lot of tempered, like, edges on this. A little bit of oxidation, but the big prominent part is caramel. You know, that caramel that you get, that sugar daddy caramel you get with age, kind of interplaying with the way that bourbon kind of originally probably, what's the word I'm looking for here? Screamed. when this beer was originally released. My guess is, and maybe it's a little bit based off of like echoes of memory, it was probably a bourbon hot beer. You know, with this being, 12.5%, which is super low ABV, with a lot of these big 750 kind of barrel-aged beers that the brewery did, they typically tended to come off a little bit more barrel-forward hot than their 15, 16, 17, 18, 19% beers tend to kind of hold up a little bit better. So you probably have a tempered bourbon barrel here, a little bit of growth from the wheat wine here. So you have that caramel from the wheat wine kind of melding into that nice kind of bourbon characteristic. It doesn't come off super cherry for me. It comes off a little bit more kind of like just rich, sweet, kind of, what's that, flambéed liquor kind of vibe to it. And that soft little bubblegum banana phenolic you typically get with wheat beers, but just very much kind of tickling in the background, nothing too aggressive. We're just going to dive in. Cheers, y'all. That's fun. It's fun old beer, is what that is. Actually, I think I'm doing a little bit disservice. I think it's a little bit better than fun old beer. It's really hard sometimes when you drink some older blonde beers like these, because you think about age, think about wines, barley wines in particular. I think about bourbon barrel aged beers. Think about time. My brain immediately kind of zeroes in on this kind of rich, decadent, darker sugar daddy component, which is my favorite thing about all aged and big beers. I don't think that it's not necessarily where these beers lead to. So when I dive into something like this, I expect a little bit more of that as opposed to this. But once I realize, okay, you're not drinking that beer, it starts to open up a really cool kind of avenue of funness, which is that, like, blonder, for the lack of a better vocabulary, wheat wine aged beer. Or more specifically, and this is where a lot of wheat wines end up going for me, aged Belgian strong ales. Because there's a little, there's a lot of like this interconnection with those beers. You can get that banana phenolic from Belgian beers that you do with a lot of wheat beers, stuff like that. So this is very much kind of going into like 10-year-old Stille Nacht kind of territory, as opposed to kind of a typical kind of like 6-year-old brewery beer. Because you get that caramel portion of the show, but it's a little bit brighter, a little bit lighter when you have, like, I don't want to say white chocolate versus milk chocolate, but a mixture of those two. When you have that kind of brighter, lighter chocolate, and you're like, okay, I'm not dealing with just this rich, decadent chocolate. I'm dealing with something a little bit brighter. That's what you're getting here. So the malts are crisper. The malts are lighter. The beer comes off not nearly as dark and as heavy, or rich is a better term than heavy, that you'd expect from, like, a bourbon barrel aged barley wine as opposed to a wheat wine. You get that lack of roastiness in combination with that lack of maybe slight dark astringency you typically get with the darker malt. So everything here has a little bit less kind of like acidic, not actually acid in the beer, but a little bit caustic kind of edge to it. It's a little bit sweeter across the board. Not overly sweet. You're drinking a wheat wine. You're drinking a sweet beer. But it has this kind of brighter, lighter, non-richer kind of component to it. It ends up being really, really fun. When you combine that tempered bourbon characteristic, it's not hot in any form or fashion. I can drink this whole bottle without actually having any issue. There's a soft oxidation which tempers it, like, even more, to where you don't get any kind of rough edges to it, but it's not negative or drying or like super like papery kind of negative, lack of flavor, lack of carbonation, things that typically come with an aggressive carbonation. It's a fun beer. I'm not going to sit here and say it's fantastic and I'm like, oh my god, I struck the jackpot with buying this for the price point I bought it at, or you should hunt these down and these are going to be the best thing in the history of mankind. But there's a super cool kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Super cool kind of evolution, or super cool just kind of growth, or super cool kind of maturity of the beer that I dig. And it really does remind me, to circle back on that Belgian Strong Ale, that Stille Nacht kind of, you know, the dull kind of like aged Belgian vibe that I think is a little bit harder to kind of wrangle, a little bit harder to kind of to find when it comes to kind of aged beer. Like those beers tend to be a little bit harder to kind of come across for me. This is a really cool, well, not intended to be that way, is a really cool interpretation of that, and the way the sweetness comes off without being that roasty toastiness, with having that Belgian kind of vibey kind of yeastiness, because it is a wheat wine as opposed to a regular wine, so you get that little bit of kind of bubble, subtle bubble gummy banana phenolic kind of floating underneath. It's a really cool beer. Again, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and kind of try to talk you into or try to convince you that it's like end-all, be-all, shelf turd magic. But it's fun. I dig it. I'm glad I picked it up. I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say about it. So let's talk about the beer real quick, and then we'll sign off. That feels really nice. It's not going to be confused with like being dense, but for a 6-year-old wheat wine, it's not lacking. Carbonation is very, very nice. It has this soft effervescence to it that brings a lot to the beer. I think if you take this carbonation and really knock it down, this whole beer kind of falls flat. It's got that caramel with that lack of a roastiness to it. That kind of brings this bright kind of sweetness to it. When you marry that with the way the bourbon kind of comes off and the lack of heat from that, the combination of the two, it's a really fun beer. And then, you know, that bubblegum banana thing that's floating around there with almost even like a slight Saison-y peppery thing, if I'm going to really kind of shove one last tasting note there at the end, is really, really fun. And a really cool beer. I dig it. I think it's fun. I'm glad I picked it up. I'm curious to see what y'all think, because I think maybe some of y'all might have had some of these lately. Let's talk about it. Bruery, have you been to the brewery? Have you been to the West Coast, East Coast, the whole nine in between? Are you an old school hoarder? Have you had this beer previously? What did you think of it? Have you had this beer or a relatively close year of this beer relatively recently? That I'm really curious about. If you have, down there, let's talk about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully you're enjoying some aged beer right now. Hopefully see you next time. Cheers, y'all.